Texas Constitution gives the governor the authority to go around the legislature and use an executive order to impose a law like Obamacare.
This is about your failure as the chief law enforcement officer of this state. This legislature.
A fiery debate between the two candidates hoping to be Texas' next governor. Good morning and thank you for joining us. I'm Josh Hinkle. We want to get right into the analysis of that debate and a look at what we can expect from Senator Wendy Davis and Attorney General Greg Abbott. Joining me today is Jim Henson from the Texas Politics Project at UT, and from our media partner we have Ross Ramsey, Texas Tribune. Thank you for being with us, both of you.
Sure, thank you. See you.
So we saw the governor debate right there. What was kind of the main issue that you thought stuck out that really resonated with people you've talked to after that?
You know, Davis was a lot more aggressive in the second debate than in the first one. She went right at Abbott, and in fact, you know, one of her strongest responses was actually to the question that he himself asked. You know, he's been questioning her ethics for a while on this thing. She's been questioning his sort of on the road, but not really on TV, not in an effective attack. And I thought she actually had a fairly effective attack during the debate.
And the Texas Enterprise Fund was one that really came up. Kind of give me the background of that and how did it play out?
Well, you know, there's recently been the results of an audit have come in that have suggested that funds were distributed through the Texas Enterprise Fund without applications, a lot of lack of process, which ironically enough was kind of under the surface during the 2010 gubernatorial campaign, this argument about cronyism against Rick Perry. But now that this report has come out, it's really put both Abbott and Davis in an interesting position. Wendy Davis has been in the Senate. She had sponsored the bill calling for the audit, but had also had some business, you know, while she was as a city council person in Fort Worth. So there was some, you know, she's kind of implicated in that a little bit, but not nearly as much as General Abbott tried to sort of point out in the debate.
And of course, this week we had the big news about Ebola here in Texas, and that was even something that was brought up in the debate as well.
Right, I guess it was the first question in the debate, how would you handle this? At the time they were debating, everybody who was actually in office was trying to figure out how do we handle this, and they've spent the whole week going from one guy in Dallas who might have it to one guy who does have it to he might have talked to 4 other people, he might have infected 100 other people. It's a developing kind of a story. I think everybody in government and out of it is trying to figure this one out.
With something happening, you know, that timely, is it difficult for candidates to get specific on what they want to do to try to tackle something like that?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I thought it was an odd moment in the sense that certainly you've moderated these things, Ross. You expect that they're going to ask something, as it was just all over the headlines. Right. On the other hand, I think you can't do much more than what they both did, which is we've made consultations, we would be responsible leaders, and I think it kind of came and went in the debate.
It's hard to deal with something that's developing. You know, we want to say anything. You know, these guys are running for governor in 30 days. They don't want to say anything permanent here that turns out to be wrong, and they don't have complete information. It's just a really dangerous question.
Yeah, especially with a topic like that.
Right.
Well, this week a couple of big polls came out related to the governor race. We have the Texas Lyceum poll, found Davis trailing Abbott by about 9 points, 49 to 40. Has the tide really shifted? Do you feel like this is accurate where we're at right now?
Well, you know, I think it's in the range of where we're at right now. I don't think you can call this the tide shifting. If you look at where the polls have been in this race, there was actually a Rasmussen poll a few weeks ago, had the race at 8. There was another national poll done by a national outlet, had the race at, you know, more like 18. I think if you look at the moving averages of these polls, it's somewhere in between there if you weight it properly. You're looking at 11, 12-point race, and as it turns out, a poll came out today, another Rasmussen poll, that had the race at 11.
I talked to Steve Monasteri in the last week, the chairman of the Texas Republican Party, and he said, you know, one of the things we're going to find out in this election is whether, I was asking him about the polls, he said one of the things we'll find out is whether the Republicans are right and this is a 12 or 14-point race, or the Democrats are right and this is a 7 to 9-point race. Either way we win, he said. So
this poll was done before this last debate, though. Do you think that anything has changed because of that?
I think it's pretty unlikely. I think that debate was of reasonably high quality. Actually, I thought it was as these things go. It was pretty good. It was well structured, pretty well done. But there's nothing in those debates that seemed to change the fundamentals. I mean, to Ross's point about what the chairman was saying, the big question that's underlying the polls and underlying how we're anticipating the election is what is the composition of the electorate really going to look like?
Right.
You know, I mean, we know that demographics are shifting. We know that there are efforts to change the turnout mix. We don't know how that's going to manifest itself in what the electorate actually looks like on election day. Likely to be a slight reduction in the share of the Anglo voting population, likely to be a slight increase in the share of the Hispanic voting population. But how that actually settles is really going to have a big impact on this race.
Right.
You know, last week we've talked a little bit about Ann Richards in the last week because people have been making comparisons of, you know, she had that late push right there and was our last Democratic governor. Can we really compare her and Wendy Davis at this point in the campaign?
You know, I actually covered that race, and it was changing starting in the second or third week of September. That race had started to move, and you know, both of those candidates were really well developed. Their name ID was like at 200%. Everybody knew who they were. Everybody knew what they were about. And the argument started to shift in September, and then Clady Williams, the Republican in that race, made a series of fumbles that sort of sealed the deal at the very end. But that race was changing before the last few days. The last few days it finally changed, but it was moving. It's hard to tell if this one's moving. I mean, you know, we're just now starting to get the autumn polls. We've got these 1 or 2 or 3 starting to stack up. Abbott has $30 million in hand. He could spend, like Brewster's millions, he could spend $1 million a day between now and the general election. Davis is a well-funded candidate. There's going to be a lot of TV, a lot of things thrown at voters, and we'll see if it gets them excited enough to turn out and change the model.
Yeah, I mean, I think that nothing that's really happened has changed the dynamic, and that's not really what's driving any change in these fluctuations we're seeing in the polls. I think that's probably a function of just the statistical play of the numbers, the difficulty of polling right now, and you know, so that the movement we're seeing really isn't driven by events like it was in 1990. Right. I think it's pretty fair, as Ross alluded to say that at a certain point in that campaign, there were a series of things that happened in that race, almost all of which broke against Clayton Williams, many of which, and in that way, that is how those races are similar, but it's not even that they're similar, it's that race has cast, I think, a long shadow over this race, and has really colored the Democrats' strategy, and I think they've been unable to push Abbott into the kind of mistakes that Williams made. I mean, that was really what Wendy Davis's aggressiveness has been about.
Well, the Republicans know all about that race too, and they've, you know, in the same way that the Democrats would like to replicate it, the Republicans are, you know, in the never again mode. You know, don't ever do this. One of the reasons Greg Abbott's not debating more, I think, is that a debate for a front runner is just an opportunity for mistakes. He's got 2 of them out of the way. No serious dents in the car. Move along.
We'll talk about Republicans not wanting to debate more. You've got Dan Patrick over the lieutenant governor race going up against Leticia Van de Putte for their one and only debate. You know, she says she's open to more, but he hasn't really made himself public. But they actually sparred a lot on immigration. I want to take a listen to that real quick.
What doesn't help is when harsh rhetoric and the politics of fear damage a region, that they disrespect the people that live there. The McAllen Chamber of Commerce and those business leaders have asked Senator Patrick and those that would use that vile rhetoric to tone it down. It hurts their economy and hurts their ability to attract jobs.
You know, I've heard her talk about this harsh rhetoric. Maybe you're talking about something like this, that the public health crisis could quickly be upon us if we don't face the reality that immigrants often carry invisible diseases. Is that what you're talking about? That maybe tuberculosis, measles, and hepatitis are serious potential coming across the board. Is that what you're talking about as harsh? Because if you are, you should talk to Senator Juan Hinojosa, because he's the Democrat from Corpus Christi in the Valley who wrote that editorial.
Well, there you go. So far, Senator Patrick is leading by a wide margin in that Lyceum poll, 47 to 33. So a little bit different there. What did you notice, Ross, because you were moderating that one?
Right.
What was the difference in that one and what we've seen with the debates for Abbott and Davis?
Well, you know, what was notable to me about this debate was that we saw primary Patrick, the same Dan Patrick that ran in a really busy, hard Republican primary, and everybody was running toward the most partisan Republicans, is the guy who showed up here. You know, oftentimes you'll come back into a general election and try to moderate your views or to talk about things that are more appealing to independents or maybe even some conservative Democrats. That's not where Dan Patrick's going at all here.
Yeah, definitely not. I mean, it sure felt like he's not going to move off of, you know, the way he's defined himself, and he's setting himself up, I think, to go into the legislative session. It's hard for me to not think about that. He's trying to send a signal that says, I'm the real thing. For those of you that are expecting me to be something different, this is what I am and this is how I'm going to play it. Now, whether he follows through on that is a different. But I think, you look at those poll numbers, and he's got the space to do that. I mean, this race is a lot different than the Davis-Abbott race. Dan Patrick just came through a bruising, expensive, two-stage primary campaign in which he campaigned statewide.
Which built his name ID way up.
Right. And Leticia Vanderpute has a lot of catch-up to do on that.
Right.
And so he's got the space to do that. It can be pretty confident that Senator Vanderpute's not going to have the time or the money to make up the ground that he gained in that primary on top of the pre-existing Republican advantage.
All right, well, a month ago, anything could happen, I guess, right?
I hope so. That's what makes these things fun.
Makes you have a job, too, I guess.
That's right. That's right.
All right, thank you guys for being with us.
Thanks.
From the 2 statewide offices to the man hoping to be Texas voice in Washington.
This long-standing lie for 35 years that trickle-down economics worked, it doesn't work. They made it up, and it has destroyed our country.
Our Robert Hadlock sits down with Democratic Senate candidate Dr. David Outmill when State of Texas In Depth returns.